Today, we're going to switch it up a little bit, and we're going to do the first ever testimony. I've never got the opportunity to have someone come and tell their testimony until this time. Today, we've got Paul Carpio. He's studying to be a doctor, and right now you're just doing your 4-year degree in, is it biology?
Yep.
Right. Biology at Virginia Tech. Super excited, and without further ado, I'll go ahead and introduce Paul Carpio.
Hey guys, my name's Paul, like Curtis said. I'm here to give my testimony. So my testimony begins like a lot of people from my hometown of Tazewell, where you go to church every Sunday, and being from a Filipino family where 98% of the Filipino population is Catholic. That's definitely something we did. So every Sunday morning we would wake up, go to church, go to Catholic Mass. And for the vast majority of childhood, that's pretty much what the extent of my Christianity was just pretty much waking up, going to do that, kind of like going through a whole motions. Since it was kind of forced upon me to where I had to wake up every Sunday to go to church, there's definitely a lack of interest. And that's definitely not at the fault of my mom and dad or the priest, because they were just trying to make sure that I had something that they think I needed. So it being kind of forced, it was almost kind of a dread for me to wake up every Sunday and go to church, to where, granted, church wasn't exactly exciting for Catholics. Especially for me, being a young kid, it's not something I get super engaged in because, the songs are kind of old. You just pretty much go and sing songs, and then you hear service, and then you drink or your sip of wine and a little bit of bread. So that whole process for me was not something I really got super engaged in. And because of that, I never really asked questions about it because, it was something I didn't know a lot about. And frankly, at the time, it wasn't really something I kind of wanted to know a lot about. So I didn't really ask a lot of questions. My idea of God at the time was really just someone who sat up in the clouds and just kind of judged us for our wrongdoings. That ignorance definitely lasted for a long time, but in high school, my friend Adam had invited me to Young Life. And for those who don't know what Young Life is, it is this organization that introduces the Word in Christ to high schoolers. But Young Life has a thing called Club, where a bunch of high schoolers will come and meet this one place and sing songs and play games and have a really good time. And at the end, they would have this thing called Club Talk, where they would pretty much talk about the Word, and it was really cool. That was really where I started to learn about Christ and who he was and what he meant and all the stuff that he was doing in our lives and changing lives. But from where my previous thoughts of what Christianity was, to where I believed that if I went through the motions and I was just being the good kid, that was enough to get me in heaven and to be a quote-unquote follower of Christ. I didn't think what they were talking about during Club Talks was for me. I thought it was for people who had never experienced Christ or had knew Christ or had learned about Christ in their lives. And then sophomore year of high school, that summer, I went to a Young Life camp called Windy Gap. This is really where I started to change a lot as a Christian. My leader at the time, John Ball and Chris Johnson, some other people from a town over me called Bluefield, all went for that week. It was great. Definitely one of the greatest weeks I can say I've ever had in my life. During camp, they would also have club and stuff, and then after that, during the night, they would have things called cabin time, where you would go and you would talk about what they said during club and kind of dive deep into who you were and kind of open your hearts and minds to the Lord. And during that cabin time, it made me realize a lot about myself that I never realized before. And one of the things that helped me realize a lot about myself is one thing that you're going to hear a lot in Young Life talks. which is filling yourself with all the wrong things. Some of these things could include getting good grades, being popular, getting a lot of achievement in sports, or even just like having wealth, like monetary wealth. You figured, or you thought that if you could just have that thing, if you could just be the popular kid, if you could get all A's, if you could get that position on your team, that life would be great, and it would be everything that you could imagine, and that it could fill you up and make you whole. That's definitely not how it works. And when I was talking through the cabin time, I realized that I had all those things. Just during high school, I was pretty popular. I had a lot of friends. I was one of the top individuals of my class. I didn't really play sports, so I didn't really worry about that one. But I also came from a wealthy family. Everything that I wanted or needed, I essentially had. This is definitely something that I never had to worry about growing up. But upon learning that I had all those things, I realized that there was something missing. It was like there was a hole in my heart that even though I had everything that I figured, someone would need, that I just didn't feel complete. And throughout the week, I learned a lot about what I should be filling myself with, and this great thing called Christ. That the Lord was the only one that can make you and me feel whole. And the last day, or the day before we left, John had pulled me to the side during the night after we had cabin talk and was like, "Hey, I really think that this is something that you should look into. I really think the Lord is something that can help you a lot." And I think this is one of the major instances where God had stepped in and had led me and helped me. And then a few days after we got back from camp, I thought about it, and I had hit up John, was like, "Hey, this is something that I want to start getting into." So after when I told John that this was something that I wanted to get into, this is kind of really where I first gave my life to Christ. But there was definitely one thing about it that made it kind of difficult. Was after I decided to do this, I still had no idea what it looked like or felt like, or just kind of journeying what it was like to follow Christ. So after initially giving my life to Christ, I kind of reverted back to what I was before, trying to fill myself with things that would never make me whole. The thing that I figured that I needed was a relationship. So for pretty much months and years, I tried to get that thing that I needed to no success. I struggled a lot with that because I just couldn't get that one thing that I figured I needed. So after trying to get the relationship that I figured that I needed, and trying again and again, and missing the spot, or almost having it with my grads and then having it ripped away, definitely hit me really hard. And my junior year of high school, I developed a kind of self-diagnosed depression. Like I said, it's self-diagnosed. It wasn't never officially diagnosed, but I really had all the classic symptoms. At some point throughout that depression, I just started feeling empty. I wasn't getting sad. I was just feeling completely void of just anything. So going through that definitely took a huge toll on me, my emotions, my spirit. And it had gotten to the point to where if I had followed through with something, I wouldn't be here today. I won't necessarily go into detail about what happened or how it happened, because I don't think it's as important, or I don't want to deviate from my testimony a little. But I will say that if I did have to follow through with it, I would not be able to sit here on this couch and tell you my story. But I will say that when it was happening, there was something or someone that just stopped me right in my tracks. And I believe that this was the second major moment in my life where God has stepped in and put me in the right direction again. After that event, things didn't necessarily get better. For some time, I was still depressed. But it kind of started to lift once it was getting towards the end of my spring semester of my senior year of high school, where a lot of good things were happening. it was kind of the end, almost the end of high school. I got accepted and decided to go to Virginia Tech, one of the schools I wanted to go to. And I found out that I was going to be the salutatorian of my high school class, which are all really good things. Thank you, God. And just kind of the idea of getting to move and start fresh really, really, I guess, changed me. Is definitely a miracle of God to like get all those things so quick and have Him kind of relieve me of my sorrows. During that time, I didn't really dive a lot into the things that I was doing before. I was still trying to get good grades because obviously I need to have those or do the career that I want. But I didn't kind of make it a priority. I didn't worry about being super popular or stuff like that. Just the things that I knew wouldn't make me whole. I didn't put at the top of my list. So going through my first year of college, some of the people that were living in my dorm hall were also involved in Young Life and had invited me to college Young Life stuff, which I think was really good for me. It definitely brought up a lot of things that I learned or felt in high school when I was going through Young Life. So kind of continuing on with my life in college, the next major intervention from the Lord was one of my old leaders, young life leaders from high school, had hit me up and asked me if I wanted to intern for her at Rockbridge, which is one of the camps that they own. One of my good friends, Chris Johnson, who's also been on this channel before, had signed up to do summer staff the summer of my freshman year of college. So he did that, came back, and he had just talked it up like it was the greatest thing that he'd ever done in his life. And I think that was really the push that I needed in order to solidify me applying to summer staff. Him going to summer staff was great for him to where he was able to serve his, the time that he needed in order to help bring kids to Christ. And that also helped me sign up for summer staff where I would be doing the same things. So this moment was really when I began to transform a lot more and develop my relationship with Christ. Because when starting the application for summer staff, I began to think a lot about my current state of where I was in my faith. All the questions on the application really led and wanted me to desire all the things that John and I had talked about all the way back in high school. A lot of things started to develop right after that. I went back to church for the first time in years of my own will, with the full intent of paying attention and trying to understand what the preacher was talking about. Even my behavior as a person definitely changed a lot for the better. Because by no means was I a bad guy, but some of the things that I was doing definitely weren't as good as they could have been. So I wasn't really following it completely, as I may have said in my application. But it was really just because I didn't know how to. But finally getting accepted as a summer staff and getting to go to camp and serve really changed my life, like almost completely. When I went to camp, so many new things happened. This was really the point to where I knew what it felt like to follow Christ. Learning more about my other summer staff members that went there and worked with me, and be able just to work and sacrifice myself really showed me what it like, or what it was like to follow Christ. Because I would be working and I would just see them just fully enveloped in the Lord and like sacrificing their time, and just the amount of love that they gave each other and the kids that we served. Definitely like it opened my eyes in a way that I never figured that I would be able to see things with. So I left camp, and really every day after that was just a really good opportunity for me to grow stronger in my faith. Pretty much every point after that was just me ended up learning more and more things about what it meant to follow Christ. One of these really good opportunities and teaching moments was last summer when I worked as an EMT for Young Life. I'm not gonna lie, some days I'd felt completely overwhelmed and thought that the things I were doing were completely over my head and that I couldn't do it. But even through that, I learned to trust in the Lord and give everything to Him and letting Him take care of me because my coworkers would always talk about how we should give all of our worries to the Lord because we know that He's going to take care of us. And I did that. I can still remember getting super stressed about something and then just kind of giving everything up to Him and then just feeling completely free. The next thing that I learned a lot during that time at camp was how to show grace, because God gives us grace all the time, irrelevant if whether we want it or not. It's always there for us to take. And that was definitely something that I tried to do during my time as the EMT at the camp, because I was the only one there that could give a medical service to those people, other than us having to call 911. And being in the medical field, it's very good to have really good bedside manners and just being super nice and inviting to people, because no one really wants a really rude doctor or EMT or nurse or something. Through that, it was hard because some of the people that we're treating or dealing with were like obnoxious or just being rude or just not wanting to have anything to do with me. So learning how to give grace in the way that our Lord gives us grace was definitely a hard thing, but it's definitely something that I learned how to do during my time as EMT. The last thing that I learned was how His plan for me is greater than everyone else's, and how I solidified that plan by going and working at the camp. Because prior to going to the camp and being the EMT, I had already wanted to be a doctor, really ever since I started college. And going throughout my time and like following Christ and knowing that He has a plan for us, I just figured everything that I had been having in my life at that time had been leading me towards finding out that being someone in healthcare services is the plan that He wanted me to do. And it was kind of interesting to know that by purely coincidence, I had already been following the plan that He had for me before I even knew that He had one. So that really closes my section of the testimony. Me sharing about how I started off knowing nothing about who God was, but thinking that it was enough, to learning that what I'm doing wasn't enough, and then learning all the stuff that I needed to know in order to follow Christ, has brought me to this point to where I am following Christ, and I love the Lord, and I trust Him, and I rely on Him to do so many things that I figured that I would just be able to do on my own. And really, because this is the end of my testimony, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's the complete end of my testimony, because a testimony isn't something that stops right after you say you've met Christ, or you think you've learned enough about Christ to where you think that's just the end. It's something that builds up as life goes on. It's like a resume. Your resume doesn't end as soon as you put all the stuff you need to put. All your experiences, your knowledge, all the things that you can put on there, you continuously put on there as time goes on. That's the same thing with my testimony. As 10 years from now, 20 years from now, it's not going to be completely different, but I'm going to be able to add so many things to it. It's because as life goes on, your experiences and the stuff you learn just keeps adding and adding to what you already know. And I think it's really important in order to share your testimony with others, because it is your story about how you met God. And I think it can be really inspiring to people about how they could meet Christ, because seeing how I began as someone who had everything but at the same time had nothing at all, was able to gain all of it and cure himself of, well, not cure himself, but letting the Lord cure him of depression that ended up me being suicidal, to where I just trust in the Lord and everything that He does. It's a very humbling story in order to share to people, because it's really you being able to give everything that you have to share, because normally people don't talk about some of the things that I may have talked about in my testimony, but even though they're things that you might not want to share, it's still part of your story, and you need to share it to however extent you want. It doesn't need to be completely verbatim per se, but you have to put it in there because it's a part of you. It is a part of how you grew with Christ and how you follow Christ, or how you found the love of Christ and everything that has to do with it. So that is the end for me. I appreciate all of you taking the time to sit and listening to my story. And like I said, I encourage all of those who follow Christ to share their story too, because it is a crucial part of who you are.